Nero's path to becoming one of history's most infamous rulers began long before he ascended the throne. It began with his mother, Agrippina, a woman as ambitious as she was ruthless. She had a vision: her son would rule the Roman Empire, and through him she would wield power from behind the scenes. From an early age, Agrippina shaped Nero's destiny. She ensured he had the best education, carefully maneuvered political alliances, and even eliminated those who stood in his way. It was through her relentless scheming that Nero was placed on the throne, despite being young and largely inexperienced. For a time, he ruled under her guidance, but it didn't take long before tensions between them began to grow. As Nero matured, he resented his mother's controlling presence. She treated him less like a ruler and more like a tool, a means to an end. The more he sought independence, the more she resisted, attempting to keep her grip on power. Agrippina had underestimated the depths of her son's ambition, and soon she found herself standing in his way. Nero decided that the only way to truly free himself was to remove the one person who had shaped his entire existence, but a simple execution would not suffice. Instead, he devised a far more elaborate plan. He gifted Agrippina a luxurious ship, a gesture meant to appear as an act of kindness. In reality, the vessel had been rigged to collapse at sea. As the ship sailed into the dark waters, the trap was set in motion. The hull cracked and the vessel began to break apart. The plan was cruelly poetic. Agrippina, who had orchestrated so many political downfalls, would meet her own in an accidental disaster. But fate was not on Nero's side that night. Agrippina survived the sinking and managed to swim to safety. Realizing that subtlety had failed, Nero abandoned all pretense. He sent his guards to finish the task in her own villa. When the soldiers arrived, Agrippina knew what was about to happen. Some say she pointed to her stomach, the very place where she had once carried Nero, and told them to strike there first. As her life slipped away, Nero was finally free. But when he gazed upon her lifeless body, he did not feel guilt. Instead, he reportedly murmured, "What a beautiful woman my mother was." With Agrippina gone, Nero was now truly in control. But this was only the beginning. Without his mother's restraints, there was no one left to hold back his darkest impulses. With his mother gone, Nero was finally free to rule Rome on his own terms. But rather than focus on governance, he indulged in a life of luxury, extravagance, and unchecked power. No longer constrained by Agrippina's watchful eye, he surrounded himself with sycophants who encouraged his every whim, no matter how extreme. At first, the people of Rome admired their young emperor. He threw grand festivals, staged theatrical performances, and even participated in public competitions. But beneath the surface, something darker was taking shape. His need for control and for personal amusement soon led to decisions that shocked even his closest advisors. One of the first to suffer under his rule was his own wife, Octavia. She had been a beloved figure among the Roman people, yet Nero saw her as nothing more than an obstacle. After years of neglect, he banished her from Rome under false accusations, but even that was not enough. To ensure she could never return, he later ordered her execution. It is said that her final moments were particularly cruel, and as proof of her death, her severed head was sent as a gift to Nero's new love, Poppaea Sabina. For a while, Poppaea held Nero's favor. She was intelligent and knew how to manipulate his desires, but even she was not safe from his unpredictable nature. One evening, a heated argument spiraled out of control. Nero, in a fit of anger, lashed out at her. She was expecting their child at the time. The incident proved fatal. Overcome with regret, Nero preserved her body, treating it as though she were still among the living. But his mourning did not last long. Soon after, he sought a way to fill the void left by Poppaea. His choice was both bizarre and unsettling. He found a young boy named Sporus, who bore a striking resemblance to her. Nero had him dressed in royal garments, referring to him as his wife in public. Some say he even staged a wedding ceremony, presenting Sporus to the Roman elite as if nothing were out of the ordinary. Nero's interests extended beyond personal relationships. He considered himself a great artist, a poet, a musician, a man destined for the stage rather than the battlefield. He performed in grand theaters, forcing audiences to watch for hours on end, as leaving before he finished was considered an offense. Meanwhile, his real duties as emperor were neglected, and the empire slowly began to descend into disorder. Yet Nero remained oblivious. He saw himself as Rome's greatest ruler, an artist king whose every act was a masterpiece. But the people of Rome were beginning to see him in a different light. Rumors of his cruelty spread, whispers of discontent grew louder, and even those closest to him began to wonder just how far their emperor would go. And the worst was yet to come. In the summer of 64 AD, disaster struck the heart of the Roman Empire. A fire broke out in the tightly packed streets, quickly consuming homes, temples, and marketplaces. The inferno raged for 6 days and 7 nights, leaving much of the city in ruins. Thousands were left homeless, and countless lives were lost. In the aftermath, rumors spread like wildfire. Did Nero start the fire himself? Some claimed that as Rome burned, he stood on a private balcony, watching the flames dance against the night sky while playing his lyre and reciting poetry. Others insisted that he had ordered the blaze to clear space for a lavish new palace, the Domus Aurea, a sprawling golden estate that would soon rise from the ashes. Whether Nero was responsible for the fire or not, one thing became clear: he needed someone to blame. The people were furious and unrest was growing. In a desperate move, Nero pointed the finger at the Christians, a small and misunderstood religious group at the time. He declared them enemies of Rome, accusing them of setting the fire in an act of treason. What followed was one of the most brutal persecutions in history. Nero unleashed a wave of terror across the city. He ordered mass arrests, and thousands of Christians were rounded up and sentenced to death. Their punishments were designed to be as public and as horrifying as possible. Some were thrown into arenas to be torn apart by wild animals, their suffering treated as nothing more than entertainment for the Roman crowds. Others were bound to wooden stakes and set ablaze, their burning bodies lighting the pathways of Nero's gardens at night. Witnesses would later describe how the emperor walked among them, admiring the glow as if it were nothing more than an elaborate decoration. Despite the horror, Nero remained convinced of his own genius. As Rome mourned its losses, he focused on his grand rebuilding plans, envisioning a city that would stand as a testament to his greatness. He used vast amounts of public money to construct the Domus Aurea, a palace of unimaginable luxury, with walls coated in gold and ceilings decorated with pearls. To the people of Rome, it became clear that their emperor was not a protector, but a destroyer. The whispers of discontent turned into open defiance. Rome had burned, its people had suffered, but Nero had only grown more detached from reality. And as he continued to revel in his unchecked power, his downfall was already beginning. For years, Nero ruled Rome with unchecked power, indulging in his every desire while ignoring the growing unrest around him. He saw himself as an artist, a poet, a musician, someone destined for greatness beyond the battlefield. But outside the walls of his lavish palace, his empire was beginning to crumble. The people had once cheered for him, dazzled by his extravagant games and performances. But after the Great Fire of Rome, that admiration turned into resentment. The rumors of his cruelty, his neglect of duty, and his obsession with luxury had reached even the Senate. His enemies grew bolder, and whispers of rebellion spread through the empire. Nero, however, remained blind to the danger. He continued staging elaborate performances, forcing the elite of Rome to sit through his endless recitals, knowing that anyone who left early risked punishment. He traveled to Greece to compete in the Olympic Games, where he declared himself the winner of every event, even in races he failed to finish. He was convinced that history would remember him as a legendary performer, not as a tyrant. But Rome had had enough. In 68 AD, the cracks in Nero's empire finally shattered. A rebellion broke out in the provinces, led by a powerful general named Galba. The Senate, which had tolerated Nero's rule for years, saw an opportunity to rid themselves of the emperor once and for all. They officially declared him a public enemy, stripping him of his title and support. When Nero heard the news, he was shocked. He had always believed he was loved, adored by the people, untouchable. But now his allies abandoned him one by one. His personal guards, men who had once sworn to protect him, turned against him. The streets of Rome, once filled with his voice and music, now whispered only one name: Galba, the new emperor. Nero fled. He disguised himself and rode through the night, searching for a place to hide. He ended up in a remote villa outside the city, accompanied by only a handful of his most loyal servants. As news reached him that soldiers were on their way to arrest him, he faced a terrible truth: his reign was over. For the first time in his life, Nero was afraid. He considered running, pleading, even throwing himself at the mercy of the Senate. But deep down, he knew what his fate would be. Roman law dictated that traitors were executed in the most humiliating ways, and Nero, who had once enjoyed watching others suffer, could not bear the thought of such an end. Determined to escape capture, he made the decision that so many fallen rulers had made before him. He would take his own life, but even in his final moments, Nero hesitated. He paced the room, muttering to himself, trying to gather the courage. Finally, as the sound of approaching soldiers filled the air, he turned to his servant and begged him for help. With his final breath, Nero is said to have uttered the words, "What an artist dies in me." And just like that, the emperor who had once lit Rome with fire and terror, who had believed himself greater than any ruler before him, was gone. His death marked the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, the family that had ruled Rome since the days of Augustus. And though the empire would continue, the memory of Nero would never fade. He was not remembered as an artist, nor as a great leader, but as a symbol of excess, madness, and cruelty. Rome would rebuild, the people would move on, but the shadow of Nero's reign would linger, a dark chapter in the history of an empire that had once called him its ruler.